just going to provide a little overview of what's going on here, and then I hate to say that we're going to hurry up and sit and wait, but it may take a little bit of time before additional work occurs. I think everybody is aware that we have many threatened oceanfront structures, either on the boundary or in some cases within the boundary of Cape Hatteras National Seashore. We are here in the village of Rodanthe, and we have two threatened oceanfront structures behind us here that we have worked to acquire for the purposes of restoring the beach and then turning the beach into a public access site. The house on the north side is a house that's just over 1,900 square feet. It was built in 1985, and the house that's closest to us, which is the house that's planned for demolition today, is over 1,500, I think it's 1,588 square feet, and it was built in 1985. So the northern house was 80, the southern house was 85. Both of the houses within the next few weeks will be removed. The house on the south side is being removed by Dunn Construction. As you can see, they've staged some equipment here. The first thing they did is go into the homes to remove any hazardous materials that were there. As a matter of fact, before we even got started on the project, we did some testing to determine that there was no asbestos or lead in the homes. Once that was clear, the contractor went in to remove other hazardous materials like some of the gases that are associated with the HVAC system, and then also the refrigerants that are, for example, in the refrigerator. Took some of those appliances out. You'll also notice on the house on the south here that in fact many of the windows are missing. That was done purposefully. He's trying to remove as much glass as possible so when the house comes down, we don't have as much splintered or fragmented glass that's all over the beach that can cause a safety hazard. But even with that, the contractor is required to rake the beach following demolition, remove all of the pilings as well, and also remove a lot of the things that you don't see, which would include some of the septic infrastructure that was associated with the house. So ideally, when this project is completed, this will be just a pristine, restored, natural beach. And the beauty of all of it is, as it becomes National Park Service property, you will now be able to walk from anywhere in the village down the street onto National Park Service property. Certainly people were doing that before, but they were technically walking through somebody's front yard. In addition to removing many of the windows and the appliances and any other hazardous materials, if you look closely, it's a little bit difficult to see, but there is a wire, a big cable that is hanging out of the house. And if you can walk up this way, you'll be able to get a different perspective on it, but the contractor put a hole in the house and he wrapped the cable around the floor trusses, and the idea is that cable is now wrapped around the center of the house. The contractor explained that the first thing that they'll do is weaken the front pilings, those are the landward pilings, by putting a notch in them and then applying pressure to that cable with the idea of a controlled fall or collapse landward onto the beach, at which point then they'll come back with heavy equipment and break apart the house and load it into dump trucks and recycle as much as possible and bring the rest of it to a landfill. So they expect that after the main house comes down, it'll take a couple more days to remove most of the materials, and then when the conditions are right, they will come back and do the same thing with the north house. They're not timing this just based on when the equipment can get here. This is based on tides as well. We're approaching low tide, I believe sometime after 2 p.m. They want to have as much dry sand beach as possible. It's likely that some pieces and parts may fall into the ocean, but by doing it on a low tide, it really minimizes the amount of debris that goes into the ocean. I'll also let you know that we do have many park staff that are nearby here right now. We wanted to make sure that if something didn't go perfectly, that we had a contingency plan, meaning that if any large sections of the house do fall into the ocean, we have staff that are on standby that can come and help clean up the beach rather quickly. That being said, the contractor has done this before and has a solid plan for a controlled collapse of the home. So that's an overview. Terry, do you know if the other excavator arrived? Okay, they're waiting for a second excavator. They said it would take about 15 minutes or so to unload it and get it ready. and then shortly after that they will begin to try to bring the house down onto the beach. So they have been telling us sometime between 12:30 and 1, but it really is up to them in a matter of when their equipment is here so they can do it safely. So that's our overview. Happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Question, Dave.
Yeah.
I asked Mike, but I want to ask you just to confirm it. Has the National Park Service done anything like this before?
Yes, we have. Several years ago, we purchased the Frisco Pier in Frisco, and the Frisco Pier had remnant sections of the pier that was out in the ocean, and the Frisco Pier house, and approximately 200 submerged pilings that were out in the ocean that you could not see. So we issued a contract to a contractor there that include diving services to jet out the submerged broken pilings, to remove the pilings and the portions of the pier that you could see, and then also to remove the pier house and restore the area.
Well, how about specifically for houses or homes that are sitting in parkland? In other words, has other national parks somewhere done anything quite like this?
I'm not aware of other parks that have done this, but I can't speak on behalf. We have 425 parks, so I'm just not sure. But I'm not aware of other parks that have done this in the coastal area. What was that? Septic tanks. By the way, just so everybody knows, this is Carrie Hart. She's our chief of maintenance. She's been overseeing the contracting, and her staff are also overseeing the contractor. Carrie, do you want to comment all about the septic systems?
So for what septic system we have, they're responsible and contracted. So from what septic systems that are found in as part of this contract, if there's anything left afterwards that wasn't found or was exposed later from erosion or anything like that, we have our service to come in.
Joy, what we've learned with some of these homes is, especially homes that are built in the 1980s, they may have had septic tank replacements in the past. In most cases, it appears that they never removed the old septic tanks, so it's not unusual during these erosion events that multiple septic tanks are exposed, and at first it's concerning, but in fact these are tanks that may not have been used for more than a decade. The other interesting thing is the northern house does not have a septic system on that property. There is, on the other side of the staircase is a typical sewer line coming out of the house. It comes into a pump, a grinder pump, that then would have, it's not active anymore since we purchased the home, pumped the sewage from the house underground through the dune onto the adjacent neighbor's property where there was an independent septic system just for that house. So other than that grinder pump, and maybe any other tanks that were left behind in the past, there should be a drain field associated with that house.
So the tanks kind of come after the house demolition?
After or during, based on sort of what they find as, it's going to take time. You'll see a lot of disturbance in the sand when they pull some of the pilings out, and they might uncover something.
Have you heard from any other interested homeowners that are potentially looking at spinning this sort of buyout?
Yeah, we've heard from multiple homeowners, and this is for the National Park Service. This is a mitigation program. We've been asked, what's the difference between a buyout program and a mitigation program? In a typical buyout program, the purpose is to assist the homeowner to get out of a very difficult situation they're in. In this case, we are happy to help the homeowners, but the primary purpose is to protect the resources of Cape Hatteras National Seashore and the visitors that are here, their safety. And so by removing these homes, it allows us to protect the resources of the seashore, to restore the area, and to make a public beach access. Multiple homeowners have contacted us saying that they're very interested in having somebody purchase their property for those reasons. Our response has been very simple, and that is right now we're really focused on carrying out what we started, and that was the acquisition of these properties, the removal of the structures, the restoration of the beach, and turning it into a public access site. Once that is completed, we'll sit down, we'll look at what went well, what could have been improved. This is a pilot project, so we're hoping to learn from it. We'll then sit down with our partners, including the National Park Trust and others, and look at whether or not it makes sense to scale this program up, and if so, how we might do that. Yeah, so maybe that sounds more of a project than it really is, but what we'll do is we'll just restore the dune line in the gap there at the end of the street. We'll put some plantings at some point into the restored dune, some sea oats that help to stabilize the dune. We'll have some signs. We typically at most of our beach access sites have signs about swimming safety and the importance of being educated about rip currents. And we'll have some posts that sort of have some arrows that lead you over the dune onto the beach.
And then we'll have a parking area. It'll just be a walk-over access.
Correct, no parking area. It's not clear. We may actually put a bike rack here. That's speaking of your question earlier about doing this before. We did that at the end of Cape Hatteras Pier Drive, which is this historic site of the Frisco Pier.
Any idea when access will be completed?
Informally, as soon as the houses are out of here and the area is safe, people will be able to walk over just like they have, but they'll be doing it legally on Park Service property owned by all of us, by all Americans. But in terms of completing a little bit of dune restoration and planting, that'll probably be several months after the demolition occurs.
Is Beacon then going to be a public parking lot? Or?
It's my understanding that Beacon is a private road with a public easement on it, so the public, I believe, already has the ability to access it. Carrie, do you want to enjoy the period of performance, how long the contractor has?
Yeah, so from the time we awarded this contract, which was last Tuesday, the contractor has 30 days to complete their work. So in that time frame, the work should be completed. Now, we do have some allowances, right? If the more eastern coast or the work, we have to go through a contract and extend it, but that's the period of completion. So I think the 8th of December.
I know in the past you've said that the rates of erosion that you've been seeing in the area are around 10 feet. Is that still accurate?
Yes, and that's a long-term estimate of erosion based on looking at about 2 decades worth of shoreline data. But yes, in this area of Rodanthe, it is common to have a rate between 3 and 4 meters per year.
Yes. For homeowners of erosion-side structures that aren't interested in participating in the mitigation program, is the MPS considering using existing federal regulations or nuisance abatement laws to remove structures?
We're currently focused on working with homeowners, working with Dare County to find solutions that benefit everybody at this point. So we'll have to see how much progress we make over the coming years, mitigating the situation and ensuring that we can really minimize the impact to the resources of the seashore and public safety. So that's our focus right now.
Did it simplify things a little bit that these houses are both completely in National Park Service land now because of the retreat?
To be fair, Kip, I can't tell you that they're both in National Park Service property. We knew that when we went into acquiring them, they were partially within the boundary of the seashore. The seashore's boundary is always from mean low water to mean high water. So that can be a little bit deceiving. You may see these waves running up way on the beach, but the way that you actually determine where mean high water hits the land is based on more of what I call like a bathtub model. Imagine the ocean being completely calm and it's mean high water. It's the intersection of that calm body of water with the land that is mean high water. So you can see just from looking behind us here that clearly on many days, including over the last month, the waves were coming up to the base of the dune. But that does not mean that that area is within the park. It's just that there's a lot of energy with that wave runoff.
Then Dave, where is the mean? That begs the question,
Yeah.
Dave. Where is the mean?
Yeah, so to determine mean high water, you need to have a surveyor that comes
Okay.
in. They use a benchmark. They use a variety of other tidal datums, and they can determine. It's done all the time by surveyors in this area. Yes.
Can you say how many Grand Ocean-side structures are currently in Rodanthe and larger by those areas?
Yeah, the answer to your question is it depends how you define threat and oceanfront structures. Cape Hatteras National Seashore is generally defining a threat and oceanfront structure in this area as a home that no longer has what I call a protective dune in front of it. and is seaward of what's called the first line of stable vegetation. And that is actually a term that's commonly used by our partner agencies. It's basically where the sea oats are here. So if there's a house that's out on the open beach, we consider that a threatened oceanfront structure. That being said, there's a continuum of which ones of those structures are more vulnerable, which ones may be imminently threatened, which means they could fall down at any time. And making that determination requires considering a lot of factors. How close are you to the water? How frequently are the pilings surrounded by water? Are the pilings being hit by the high energy waves? When was the house built? How deep are the pilings in the substrate? And what's the condition of the pilings? You really have to look at all of those factors to make that determination. That being said, there are about a dozen homes that are oftentimes either surrounded by water or clearly in the intertidal area, many of which are also not occupiable right now based on Dare County's assessment, based on safety concerns or not meeting other codes. There are probably another dozen homes that are still threatened oceanfront structures and seaward of the dune, but may not be standing in the water on a daily basis.
How did you determine the market value for these homes?
The federal group that made that determination is called the Appraisal and Valuation Services Office. It's referred to as APSO. It's part of the Department of Interior, and they are essentially the real estate and appraisal side of the Department of Interior. They make the determination on what's called fair market value, and that is determined by hiring an appraiser that performs a government appraisal that's very similar to an appraisal that you would have done for your bank if you were getting a loan and purchasing a private property.
Rodanthe gets all the attention, but we got somewhat of a similar situation, Avon and Buxton, but with the beach nourishment that's gone there, obviously that takes away that. Any concerns about those areas? Is that something that's being watched closely to see what happens over the next 5 years?
Yeah, that is being watched very closely. As a matter of fact, after some of the hurricanes that were well offshore, some of the swell that came in that certainly made for great surfing this fall, there has been quite a bit of erosion in the village of Buxton. So much so that a lot of the newly crafted dune and dune fencing has washed away. And we've noted recently over the last month that the pilings of some of the homes there are surrounded by water during certain high tides. So there are concerns. There are threatened oceanfront structures in Buxton, despite the beach nourishment project that was done there and completed at the end of the summer of 2022. That being said, Dare County's beach nourishment project there was very successful for the second time. Their purpose for implementing that beach nourishment project was to protect Highway 12, and our observations are that they continue to have a very successful project regarding that objective.
Is there a danger of once these homes come down and you begin the process of deconstruction, any of that debris being washed into the ocean in the interim while your process is moving all that?
Yes, there is a likelihood that some of the debris from the demolition is going to end up in this area right next to the house. As I mentioned earlier, we've actually staged a group of Park Service staff that are here to assist the contractor in the event that is more than anticipated, just to be downstream of the area. We have a bit of a northeast wind right now. You can actually if you watch the ocean carefully right now, you can see there's a slight current to the south. So they're prepared to be south of these homes and pick up anything that washes up in the event that some of the debris falls into the ocean.
I seem pretty rough with it. How are they going to get the debris if it?
Yeah, well, great question. What tends to happen is just with all these waves coming in at a pretty regular interval, it doesn't take very long for floating objects to land on the beach. So they would be able to do that over a few hours if any of the debris fell in the ocean.
Okay, the house is empty, right?
I think so.
You'll find out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that one of the staff, the contractors, are in there just doing some final preparations, but certainly there's nobody living in the home.
There's no
And there will be
content.
nobody inside the home when it
And the
comes in.
contents are gone.
Most of the contents were removed.
Last time was what?
The house on the south side was purchased by the prior owner, I believe, in 2021, and he told me that he actually was only able to rent it a few times, and that for most of the 2 years that he owned it, just due to damages to everything from the stairs to primarily his septic system, that he was not able to keep it rented the way he had planned. The northern house was rented for most of the summer, and I believe was rented up until a few weeks before we closed on the property.
How much did it rent?
What was that?
You know how much it
I don't. Yes.
Okay, so being rented up to a few weeks prior to purchase, how, like structurally, like how threatened was it like at that time? Was it in any sort of imminent danger of collapsing?
To my knowledge, no, I'm not a structural engineer. We have relied on Dare County Building Department to be inspecting these homes and making determinations on whether or not they're meeting current codes or whether or not there's any concerns about the structural integrity of the pilings. To my knowledge, the northern house, there were no concerns there, but you'd have to speak to a structural